We have the pleasure of having a hometown girl be our keynote speaker for this afternoon. Dr. Lynelle Thomas is a native Chicagoan who attended Rush Medical College and completed a pediatric residency at the University of Chicago, right here. In the early 1990s, she practiced pediatrics in Chicago's most violent as well as most impoverished communities. She practiced pediatrics in Woodlawn, in Kenwood, and in the Argyle Garden community. It was in those settings that Dr. Thomas became interested in relationships between physical and mental health as they are influenced by the environment and political social factors. Dr. Thomas, having gained this new insight and interest, went back to school, and she went back to medical school, and she completed an adult, child, and adolescent psychiatry training at Yale University School of Medicine, after which she enjoyed an assistant professorship at Yale's Child Studies Center. In addition to her teaching, Dr. Thomas became a consultant for the Yale New Haven Hospital Pediatric Emergency Psychiatric Service. She also consulted to numerous research and nonprofit projects, which included programs such as the Program on Poverty, Disability and Urban Health, the New York City Outward Bound Program, and the Connecticut Health Foundation. Fortunately, Cook County, she came back to Chicago, and fortunately, Cook County and the Isaac Ray Center had the great presence of mind to bring her on board as their Director of Psychiatric Services for the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. Dr. Thomas views her work at the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center as an extension of her mission to service the underserved. Now, despite her subspecialty training, she describes herself as a primary care physician. She aims to promote and enhance the well-being of children and families, and that's why we're all here. And Dr. Thomas's focus is on anticipatory guidance, prevention, and early intervention. So without further ado, please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Lynelle E. Thomas.
Good afternoon. I should try to speak into both of these. I'm sort of a walker and a pacer, so this is going to be a problem. Could we slide this back a little bit so I could see the slides? Thanks. Or maybe I'll just slide this forward. Oh, great. Okay, I am excited to be here. It's serendipity that I am here through accidentally running into some wonderful judges that are actually on the opposite side of the detention center from where I work. Judge Johnson, Marianne Johnson, and Judge Thomas heard me speak at one of their judges' educational conferences and asked me to present here. So I have to, there's a caveat. I've done a lot of academic speaking and teaching, but I'm a fledgling at sort of giving a talk to a large audience of diverse disciplines who are all focused on the same kinds of things that I'm interested in. So this is the first time I've been allowed to, I hope, express a little bit of opinion, mixed in with the science and information, as well as reflect, as well as describe some personal stories and issues and concerns that I have nothing to do with my work. So I'm going to have the child psychiatry hat on, but occasionally I'm going to flip it off, and so just indulge me if you will. I think you will enjoy it. I hope you will find it informative and provocative as well, because I plan to leave you with more questions than answers to questions if I'm successful. So this picture that I downloaded, I actually never got a copy of the brochure, but it was attached to an email, and I spent a lot of time looking at this. Living like we're bulletproof, youth visions, voices. This is part 2. I was not, unfortunately, able to attend part 1. This is me, Director of Psychiatric Services. IRC, Isaac Ray Center, I have to let you know, I'm not a county employee, although I'm very much allied with county employees, but we are vendors. The Isaac Ray Center is a not-for-profit, and we are vendors. We provide mental health services to the Juvenile Detention Center. Again, just emphasizing the questions that were sent out, I read them, all the wonderful disciplines, public health, juvenile justice, education, and I thought, what can I talk about to sort of weave all of these areas of interest together under a common theme? And that's what I'm going to try to do. So it's going to be sort of a little bit of tapas, little dips and dabs, putting pieces of a puzzle together. That's the Juvenile Detention Center. You probably know this. The age range, the average age is, actually, you know what? Unfortunately, my computer is old as Methuselah, so this slide is actually on this computer, came out splayed. But the point is, we've got an average age of about 15, 16, that's at 37%. As we all know, most of the kids there are African American at 84%, and then Hispanic 12%. Wonder why. These statistics are actually old. These are 2011, 2012. A third from 7 zip codes. Does anybody know how many zip codes are in Cook County? How many zip codes there are all together? Anybody? No? But 33% come from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Roseland, Humboldt Park, Auburn, Gresham, West Englewood, Austin, and South Lawndale. This is a slide I try to show to everybody that I give a tour to that comes through. The majority of kids there, 34% are there for a JAW, a juvenile arrest warrant, meaning they didn't commit a crime, but they were on probation, and they did something they weren't supposed to do. They broke a rule, they broke curfew, they didn't go to school for a couple of days, they dropped dirty for smoking marijuana. So it's not a new crime, but most of them are there because they're, again, detained, alleged criminals, but not convicted, and they're waiting for the process to move along, and that takes a long time. In the meantime, they're watched very closely. They have a lot of rules that have been set up for them to provide them structure and direction, and a lot of times they just can't do what they're supposed to do. And there, of course, we do have kids that are this is, again, for 1 year period, they're for aggressive crime. So where's my judges? Is unlawful use of a weapon, is that violence against another person, or is it something else? I was trying to distinguish between those that are possession, okay. So I try to separate the ones that are involved that have nothing to do with aggression or confronting a human being, but it's property, burglary, you break into someone's house. And these in the yellow, the smaller percentages are the ones that involve, the kids that you're afraid of when you walk down the street. So that's just a take-home point. Surprise, our kids are really sick. This is a run of the seminal studies. A woman from Northwestern, Dr. Linda Teplin, they have a project, and they've been doing longitudinal studies, very elegant scientifically, really stringent criteria for making diagnoses, looked at our kids, and actually they're following them over time into the adult jail, 26th California, unfortunately. General population green, juvie population, boys and girls, they're sick. These are the disorders. I'm gonna just not pay much attention to those since this is not a mental health talk. But they're sick, lots of substance abuse, lots of comorbidity, meaning marijuana and depression, marijuana and anxiety, marijuana and PTSD. So they're very sick. They have complicated illnesses, complicated lives. This is not just because I work there, and my colleague can vouch for me. They get Cadillac services now. The JTDC is under a consent decree, so we've got the feds looking at us. The ACLU got involved in 2006, 2007 for a class action suit. Things were going wrong at that place. I think they were double capacity, but over the last 6 or 7 years, those kids get great services, and not just because I provide them. They get things, and they have people paying attention to them that they would not get in the community. They really don't. And lots of the mothers are like, next time you go there, make sure you get them to clean your teeth. Make sure you get your hearing checked. So, is there something to be proud of? Am I proud? I'm frustrated, but we do a good job. These are our guys and gals. Most of the work that I do focuses on really, with my psychiatry hat, mental illness, criminal recidivism, what's the relationship? And there's not an easy answer. We'd like to believe certain things, but I'll challenge you on that later. And then we'd have some consultation with some of the judges, which is what allowed me to be here. Quick and dirty, psychiatry, child psychiatry 101. Mental illness is distant childhood. If you asked somebody maybe 50, 60 years ago, the answer would have been no, because their brains aren't developed. Kids can't be depressed. Kids can't be anxious. So psychiatry, even pediatrics, is a young field. So if untreated mental illness sort of stalls development, and if it goes untreated for long periods of time, you have kids that are basically retarded. Their development is stalled in an earlier stage. Surprise, 36% of children and adolescents with serious illness don't get treatment. And those that do often don't get what is necessarily very well considered and judicious and appropriate. Surprise, who doesn't get services? Okay, we don't even have to look at that slide. African people of color don't. And this is complicated reasons. And I'm going to bring up, when I bring up race, race is an easy, quick and dirty. If you're pulling up weeds, you pull up the dandelion, you pull up the flower, but the roots are much deeper. So racism it's very big and bright, and it's always there in the United States, history of civilized world, but there's a lot of stuff that underlies that. So big in the news, the new asylum, reasons why. Access is a big buzzword, but I want to break apart access into sort of structural considerations, barriers to treatment, deserts. The reason I'm working full-time at JTDC is because I used to work at CMHC, a Community Mental Health Center with Carl Bell. I worked half-time there. I'd worked in Inglewood at 63rd and Western, and then on the South Shore Clinic, I worked there part-time, and 30 years of providing services just to underserved African-American people, schizophrenics, children, funded by grants and funded by the state and funded by the city and county, and 30 years closed. Talk isn't cheap anymore. This is one of my favorite shows in syndication. You think psychiatry, you think somebody that's talking to you. Nope. People aren't going to pay much. Insurance companies aren't really going to pay for you to talk to someone because it's expensive. Time is money. It's easier to give someone a pill. Any psychiatrists in the audience? Hopefully not. So, are there? Okay. Anybody that knows me and knows my practice knows that I have great respect for the science and the biology of medication, and it's important, but especially in children whose brain's still developing, it's the last alternative. Just like if you've got a bad knee or a bad joint, the last thing you want to do is cut somebody open and put a new joint in. You try everything else, physical therapy, stretching, meditation, massage, and that's the last thing you do. Unfortunately, this is really cheap and it's quick. So sometimes do something. Better living through drugs. The pharmaceutical industry is part of the reason that our healthcare system is a little off balance. They're making millions and billions and billions of dollars and convincing us that we do need medication, and we're looking for it. They advertise it on TV. Do you have this and this? Ask your doctor. Okay, yeah, okay. And lots of, this is just for those of you who have seen the commercial late at night for Risperdal. Has your son or husband been on Risperdal? Have they grown breast tissue? You could be eligible for compensation. So, peanuts. Lucy's sitting there at her office. I have feelings of depression, says Charlie Brown. What can I do about this? She's thinking. Snap out of it, 5 cents, please. So this is just a cute slide. So I don't think this is a word in parody, but mental health care and the parody of all the advocacy that's going on around the country to get legislators to make insurance companies treat physical illness the same and with the same funding and attention as psychiatric illness. So impaired, it almost sounds like impaired. So pick your favorite historical figure or current popular figure. accessibility, there's a psychological access. So we got these service deserts. If there was a clinic there, that doesn't mean people are going to go looking for help. This is a quote from a grandmother, was in one of the New Haven, Connecticut housing projects, where we went, trying to do good. We had grant money. We went there, plopped some well-trained child psychiatrists down in the middle, one of the apartments, and cleaned it up, sitting there. Tried to engage the families. We had pizza. We had, educational settings. We had recreational activities, but nobody came. Maybe 2 or 3, but if you build it, they won't necessarily come. She said, and I, schmoozed around, and she was like, you know what? I may be poor, but I'm not crazy. And I understood what she was talking about. But there were a lot of kids in there that needed some help. So what do we do about that? Mental health, quick and dirty. State of well-being. So you can realize your potential, you can cope, work, relationships, contribute. Disorders characterized by distress and impaired functioning. Mental illness is a disorder of I had this animated so they would come in one at a time, but brain, imagination, heart, or feelings, or all of the above. It's a brain disorder, and actually in the last 10 years, maybe 2 decades, but especially 10 years, the science of the neurobiology, in terms of being able to measure things and be able to do the scientific method and reproduce data and outcome, has grown tremendously, and it's so exciting because in the end, everything that we always thought was going on is really going on. But it's a sort of the brain, it's common, it's treatable. Everything you think, feel, taste, smell, feeling the seat up against your bottom there now, chewing, all of that starts in the brain. It really is, it's all there. The reason that you are tired, the reason you can breathe and your heart's beating, you're not thinking about everything we think and feel and do, it's there. It's a neural, biochemical, electrical impulses in these tiny little things called neurons and synapses. Mental illness caused by mothers, fathers, ancestors' stress endured. It's multi-determined. It's not just a bad gene. It's not just your mother or father was an alcoholic. It's not. It's not just I live in a terrible neighborhood, because most of us thrive. We all go through stressful times. Where we need some help. We might reach out for our minister. We might reach out for our loved one. We might reach out for a bottle. We might reach out for the gym. And we all go through these periods of time where we're impaired and distressed. And generally, we can pick ourselves up with normal help and normal resources, and sometimes we can't, and those times are the times when people like me come into play. So I'm going to take off my psychiatrist hat right now, because even though the place I work has a lot of sick kids, I'm there because to treat mental illness and to make diagnosis and prescribe medication. The kids that I work with, and I think the people that we're talking about, they have psychiatric illnesses, yes, but that's the tip of the iceberg. The problem and the reason that they're in that detention center and they grow up there, they come at 12 and then they're back at 13 and 14 and 15 and 16, it's not just because somebody didn't give them their medicine for bipolar disorder. It's not. It's not because they skipped their appointment. I mean, the more pervasive, insidious things it's everything else below, and it's everything that we're here to talk, you guys are talking about today. I'm in a very bad mood. Nobody better mess with me today, boy. The word dis-ease, I think it's Anglo-Franco, dis meaning without, ease. Freedom from concern, anxiety, or solitude, a quiet state of mind. Dis-ease. It's not psychiatric disorder, it's diseased communities. It's traumatized kids, it's traumatized communities and families, and the consequences of those. Dis-ease. Looking at this, the bullet in the stone or metal, and I was thinking about bulletproof. So a bullet, man-made weapons, and man-made a bullet, the technology that can penetrate stone, wall, and actually from a distance, it almost looks like a flower. If you look at a distance, I love this photo. But you know what? The bullet going through, it can pierce flesh. But do I want to be bulletproof, my flesh to be bulletproof against a bullet? I mean, is that what the real danger is? And I suggest maybe not. This thing that's happened, that thing, it went through the wall, it's over. But what's more concerning and dangerous is the fear of getting shot and the anticipation that you are going to get shot, the anticipation that you're going to get a call during the school or after the school day, somebody that your kid is in the hospital not coming home, that my mother, my father, my auntie, it's the fear and anticipation. If you wake up every day anticipating that somebody's going to be shot next, or how am I going to go to school today? What neighborhood do I need to shuffle through based on who my uncle was affiliated with? Or maybe I just won't go to school because something's going down today, and I don't fit in there. It's too, And the mothers that say, when we call them from the jail to ask them, get collateral history and do our assessment of the kids. I'm glad LaShawn, Taiwan, I'm glad he's there because I know he's safe. Yeah, talk about stress marks in the heart. The kids that feel comfortable there, they're acting wild and running the streets in the community, and that's, the probation says, this child is out of control. They come to us, structure, adults that are predictable, rules, limits set, school, 3 meals a day, shower, clean, clothes every day, structured time, and they thrive. I mean, and people don't understand. They're like, no, he's out in the streets, he's at home, he curses me, he don't come. They come and they are a different person. They're the model 16-year-old. Am I proud of that? Because we created this aberrant environment. So the pictures, I'm into visuals. Does anybody know what this is? This is actually from the Lascaux caves in France. Which it's let's see, the Lascaux caves in France were discovered. It's not the only sort of prehistoric Paleolithic artwork, but it's some of the most famous because it's most very intricate, and it's really interesting to look at and learn and try to understand the culture of us human beings when we weren't different races. We were all just sort of all together trying to survive. This is actually the way they signed their drawings, actually with the handprint, and they sort of, I think, chewed and then they spit the ochre or the carbon around the hand. It's sort of like a signature. I just love this, and it's sort of, I don't know, reminded me of that. To do the work that I do, and probably the work that you guys do, we say you got to be optimistic. You have to be, because how can you take this day after day? I mean, how can they take it day after day? But as I know the science and learn it, this is what makes me happy and excited, because over centuries and millennia that human beings have evolved on the planet, we have become hardwired in our primitive brains, hardwired, and the phenomena has allowed us to survive and thrive. And we did it then with no food, no water, and elements, and animals. And what I know for a fact, and what I want the take-home point is that hardwiring is still present. We're more sophisticated. We can make higher level decisions because we're a civilized society. But there's things there that we can access that are real, and we've actually moved away from them because we are influenced by things going on around us. We have lost some of our instincts that got us here. It's beautiful pictures. So I'm off the hat. So let's get personal. So I'm a pediatrician. How'd that happen? So I went to Weiler Children's Hospital. Now it's called Comer. Wanted to help. And I met Dr. Gloria Jackson Bacon. I don't know if anybody knows her. I don't know if she's still out there, but she was sort of one of my first mentors, and she had built a clinic in Altgale Gardens, and there's some data and intervention she did where she decreased the infant mortality rate significantly by bringing in the young mothers and doing what you do. You teach, you get WIC in there, you hold people accountable, you give them some responsibility. And so I worked there. If you don't know where it is, it's way out south. I don't know the history of housing projects. I don't know if it was built around the same time as Cabrini Green. Oh, and yes, Obama was there in 2009, but I was there in 1991. But this is actually the community where he was doing all the advocacy. And the model was sort of just regular houses side by side. It wasn't the top on top on top on top drawers of housing like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor homes. But it's surrounded on one side by wastewater from the factory by factories, and on another side by a highway. And essentially there's like one entrance in and one entrance out. And this was all sort of new to me. They were doing the crack cocaine epidemic was really sort of hopping back then. They were doing police sweeps to sort of get out the gang members. And so it was a really a rough time. But there was this clinic, sort of beacon oasis. It was safe. People were like, why do you want to work out there? Because they deserve the same care as everyone else. But it was a safe place, you know, until after dark, and then you just take and you make sure you get out of there after dark. But, you know, we had people walking up the street with knife wounds and stuff. But, so me, not, you know, excited, ambitious, 25. And quick story, young boy with asthma, 18-year-old with asthma. I just come from University of Chicago, experts. New medications were coming out. The first inhaled steroids. There was all kinds of medicine beyond what was called theophylline, this really old primitive medicine. And I learned the kids weren't supposed to die of asthma because we have treatment. A boy I'd seen for like a school physical, I found out sometime later that school year that he was dead. How did he die? No, he didn't get shot. Died of asthma. Well, we gave him an inhaler. You're not supposed to die of asthma. So, of course, the first thing I thought, what was the song? It was Flavor Flav had a song out back then, or maybe it was Public Enemy. 911's a joke, and so of course we were like, it's because it's just true. It takes, you call, they're not going to come. There are no cabs that are going to come there. There wasn't a bus that came all the way through, and most of the people didn't have cars, so you had to walk out of the Housing Project to the bus stop. Anyway, so of course we were all like, you know, 911. You know, they're killing our kids. But I learned it was more complicated than that, because that was the easy answer. But there's a lot of reasons that people, not just poor people or impoverished people, there's a lot of reasons that people don't get the treatment they need. And sometimes it has to do with them and their family systems and us. You know, about doctors. We don't want to go to the doctor. When we get sick, we go to the doctor. Oh yes, I'm coming back, I'll take it. You feel better, you don't go to that follow-up appointment. As it turns out, I learned that, unfortunately, out in settings like this, one of the most allergenic, one of the particles that stimulates the most allergic irritation for people with asthma or allergies is cockroach dander. And they're by a highway, so you have the fumes from the highway, and then they're by the waste management, and you have the waste. So there are all kinds of reasons that this community sort of was swimming in lots of debris that will cause them to be sick. We were there to treat, but people also have to seek help, you know, even if there's access. So it was more complicated than just that, you know. So I thought, behavior. 13-year-old girl coming in pregnant. She didn't know she was pregnant. Her grandmother was her cardiac. Something's wrong with her. What's wrong with her? Examine her, and then I'm like, where's the baby? You know, what? So I need to know more. We were the one-stop shop. I knew nothing about anything other than pediatrics, and they didn't teach you the behavior relationship to health. And so that's when I went back, child psychiatry, learned about development gone awry, development of an individual baby and family or community. How do you keep it from going off the tracks or up the escalator? Take-home point, science and data. I learned that better too. When you're studying something that's psychosocial instead of something you can measure and take a picture of and draw blood on, you have to be really good with your science, because it's very easy to take numbers and data and mix them up and say whatever you want. So science is replicable. You get the same findings over and over and over again. Data, numbers, you can mix them up based on how you feel, what point you're trying to make, to evoke, provoke, to evoke, cover up. Science does not equal data. So how do we become? How much time do I have? How am I doing on time? Okay. So where do we come from? Anybody who did, Biology 101, nature and nurture. So nature, let me climb up the strand of DNA to see where life takes me. And nurture, a lot of it. This is a little sperm and a little oocyte, a little egg, coming together, and all the DNA gets mixed together, and half of it's from your mom, half it's from your dad. this hot news is, you can talk about this at cocktail parties and look it up and listen for it in the future when you listen to your news shows, is epigenetics. And epigenetics is not mixing genes together to try to create a female baby with blue eyes. It is the idea that, not that we manipulate our DNA, our genetics, our code that describes who we're going to be, it is actually changes over time. So it's not like you'd roll the dice and that's who you are. It actually based on our experiences in life, our exposures to things, chemical and experiences otherwise, trauma, bad experiences or good experiences, our DNA doesn't change, it's the same, but it can unfold and different parts of it can be expressed for good or for evil or for disease or for cancer. So it's not just psychological phenomena, but also biology. And we're learning more and more about these, that it's not over when you pop out after 9 months. Things can change, and there's things that you can do for yourself to help your DNA unfold the good and express the good. There's things that can happen to you as a child that make it so that the genes that are already there for the bad sort of unfold, and the protective factors close back up and don't get expressed. So this is really, really exciting. This is also one of the take-home. This is what keeps me hopeful too, because things can change. And this isn't just when you're a child. Your DNA expression can change even when you're an adult. And there's lots of research on this. A lot of it's, of course, happening outside the United States right now. But even in your 30s and 40s and 50s, there's things you can do to change that path that you were on, for good or for evil. So that's exciting for me. Take-home point, the brain, our first ecosystem, the brain size develops for the most in the first year of life. That's why babies have such big heads. Babies' heads are like 1/4 of their body, and then the rest of it up to adulthood is moving, changing, pruning, connecting, myelinating. All kinds of things are happening from newborn to adult, and this is actually another sort of new science. They're realizing that the brain of an adolescent is not fully formed as that of an adult until the age of 25. And this has had application for the juvenile justice system, holding a 15-year-old accountable and charging him as an adult, when the reality is the neurobiology is not there yet. And where does responsibility lie, and intent and all of that. So it's really exciting, although, a couple hundred years ago, you got married at 13 and had kids because people didn't live that long. So just another take-home point. It takes them a long time to have the capacity to think about the future and not be impulsive and not be centered on themselves. Because this area, the prefrontal cortex, that's sort of the executive functioning director of the brain, is the last part to develop. The primitive parts, the wild parts, the strong superhero parts are in the back, the old brain. And the part, the instinct, that's the old brain. And the new brain develops last. The brain is use dependent. Again, this is emphasizing the more you use it, whatever your experiences are in your life, in your family, in your house, what you see, what you do, how you're treated, if you're nurtured, if you're ignored, if you're neglected, if you were thrown around, if you are afraid all the time, all that changes the brain at a neuroendocrine level. So that's the cells and the hormones, like your dopamines and your serotonins, and at the level of the DNA. It's going on every day. Not that one meeting and I meet you and I'm going to change forever, but over time, it's a collective process. So the first ecosystem. Oh, this is such a cool slide. One of, Russell made this for me. So it's a long slide, but I have no technical skill, but she made this. This is Bronfenbrenner, I think he's a psychologist in the 60s, and he sort of had the theory that, ecosystem is not just out at the wading pond with, the bacteria and the fishes, but we all live in an ecosystem. An ecosystem is, so you have the macro, which would be dominated by beliefs and ideologies. Oh, beliefs and ideologies? That's just thoughts. Your exosystem, this is all headed somewhere. Your school board, local government, parents' workplace, mass media. These are all the things that actually are going to affect who we are and why we're here today and why we look like we look, why we do what we do. In local industry. And then you have your meso system, religious beliefs, your neighborhood you choose to end up living in, your school, home. And then the microsystem would be your home, the child, your siblings, the parent, your parent, the neighborhood, peers, child, adults, religious setting, we're getting there, teachers in the school, all important. And then the individual is in the center, so it's like dropping a penny in the water and all the ripples, but everything on the outside ripples into the middle, and the middle actually ripples out. So it's transactive. So who I am as a child when I'm born, if I have ADHD, and I'm hyper and have lots of energy and can't focus for whatever reason, that's going to affect how my parents view me. That's going to affect how I do in school. That's going to affect how my teachers treat me. Then how they treat me affects how I feel about myself, and that I'm always getting called out. And so school's not kind of reinforcing me like school and adults are supposed to reinforce kids. So I'm like, this isn't for me. I don't feel successful. I don't feel good about myself. I'm going to find a place or find something to do where I do feel good about myself. So I'll be the clown, or I will withdraw, or I'll be depressed, or someone will recruit me to say, hey, you know what? You're pretty smart. You got a lot of energy. I know your school's not treating you. Come on here, take this right over here, take this back. And so again, it's transactive. And it's also, another take-home point, it's over time. So this ecosystem here, if I was that kid 100 years ago, and I was in Mississippi, and my parents worked on a farm, or if I was in Minnesota off of the Lake Superior, and my parents worked in a steel mill, and, they hadn't been educated, and they could still own a home, they could still get me a good school. I'm hyper, but I don't have to sit in front of a computer. There's a success that could have been had there. So all that to say, it all depends on not just the moment, but we have to look historically at these things. This is actually just a favorite picture of mine. On NPR the other day, I overheard an article by this guy, Richard Rothstein, about this is the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And this is just, again, emphasizing school as a part of the ecosystem for a kid. This gentleman writes a lot about school reform, about poverty, about social change. And so desegregation, it's really about poverty. Access, this is not about who you sit next to, it's about what you have access to in terms of schooling. Greatest predictor of incarceration as an adult. School failure. Final destination, so our kids' road to healthy adulthood. So I'm going to put my child psychiatry hat back on. This is not actually mine. This is, and I can't think of it, this is from one organization, not-for-profit, that's trying to come up with ideas. This is the idea, what they came up with in terms of the key things that can help the children that I work with turn around. Family supports and connections. It's all about family. Access to childhood trauma deprivation, services to strengthen the adults. It's about the adults. Success, whether it's in school, success anywhere, and basic life skills, which you're only going to get from some adult. Reduction of exposure. Exposure to illegal activities. Criminal thinking doesn't just come, you're not born with that. It's because of people that you're around. It could be your own family. Jobs. Exposure to the universe. If you live and you're surrounded by something, Jackson Brown said, if you're surrounded by impoverished stuff all day, every round's not going to go higher. Every round's going to keep going around and around and around and around. Mentors, I put that in quotes because mentorship programs, great in theory, but a mentor has to have a commitment of their heart and soul and has to be there over a period of time. And you just can't, most people aren't going to be able to do that for no compensation, people they don't love. And then social opportunities for success. There we go. This is another Lasco, painting with hands. That's me. I'm done. Anybody have any questions? I don't even know if we have time for questions. I know I spoke longer than I was supposed to. Anybody have a question?
Yeah, put your email back up.
Oh, yes, please email me for whatever reason, just to say hi.
About what's happening in the detention center. And that most of the kids would be medicated without necessarily having some.
What you talking about? No, where'd you hear that from?
Well,
No, I mean, that's a good,
that's just a rumor.
yes, yeah, well, that actually is, that
That they're
is,
getting medicated, so instead of getting some type of,
Yep.
not
Right.
responsibility, but instead of getting some type of reinforcement in other ways or some
I
behavior.
understand.
things that
And
they
at some
do.
point, that probably was true. I have to say, on my watch, well, actually, when the woman that was my predecessor as director, she was a little sort of more focused. She was a child psychiatrist, and what people hire us to do is prescribe medicine. If you're a surgeon, they expect you to cut something open. And so I think there was part of the system got caught up in that, and there were about a third of kids, I think, that were on medication. Really excellent assessments and people that were thoughtful about it. Of course, the kids, when they go home, oftentimes the medicine goes in the garbage, and they don't have any follow-up services. But on my watch, it's actually gone down to about a quarter, 1/4 of the kids are on medicine. And my team is just on board with me. The problem is, when you get people paying your salary and they're sort of bean counters and they work for the county, and you're a psychiatrist and only a third of the kids, 1/4 of the kids are on medicine, what are you doing? And I try to explain to them, it takes more thought not to put kids on medicine. I mean, because you have to make the choice and you have to keep gathering information. You have to talk to people and talk to their parents and try to get to them. And I think that's, but I told my team that we're holding the torch for that. And I've actually gotten, a lot of people are like, yay, Dr. Thomas, she's not putting the kids to sleep. But a lot of people are like, what the hell, what are you doing? What are we paying you for? You guys have the biggest budget for mental health, and the bean counters are supposedly coming after us. I've been warned, and they're gonna say, you guys, what are we paying you for? If the kids aren't on medicine, as opposed to thinking all the other things that we do and we could add, and the expertise that we bring. So people tell me that I need to start doing something differently because I'm gonna lose my job. So.
Well, I want to thank you for being thoughtful as to who you put on medication and who you don't. So thank you.
Questions, comments? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Actually, I have to say it again. The Cadillac is, we actually are setting a high bar, a standard nationally in terms of what we do. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The question, how do we determine what kids might need mental health services or medication? We actually, which is unusual in most settings, but we have enough staff, we screen every single kid that comes in. They get a screen for mental illness, they get actually medical screens too. I mean, it's incredible the number of kids that come back in with sexually transmitted infections, boys and girls. I mean, it's triple or quadruple the number of kids in the community. So that's something else. I mean, what are they doing? I mean, and how are they? I mean, again, they will come back every time they come in. They get screened for the basics, like gonorrhea and chlamydia, and if they're positive for one of those, then they automatically do a hepatitis B screen. We do HIV screens. We encourage kids to do that too, but they're just what are they doing? I mean, we know what they're doing, but what are we going to do about it? Mm-hmm.
You hear a lot today, this morning included, about how the juvenile justice system re-traumatizes kids.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how does the system traumatize people? Well, it's traumatic getting arrested, I know that. We try to minimize the trauma that the kids experience in a setting where they're locked up and they have to be searched every time they come and go. I mean, it's hard not to traumatize someone, but the buzzwords for the industry now, for the industry of caring for kids and adults in these settings, if you're, higher level restorative justice, is trauma informed. Meaning you're not treating the trauma, but everything you do, every person, from the person that's serving up your food, to the person that's examining you, to the person that is handcuffing you and searching you, is informed of how to help you maintain your humanity and how to help you tolerate what's going on there. And of course, you can imagine corrections, there's a dynamic tension between those of us who are trying to do good and help and the job of a corrections. Corrections is safety and security. And we know that, we have that, and we're the warm and fuzzy, and we're like, talk, don't, and so we're always fighting it out. And this is an industry, and the change has to come from the top down, So you can imagine some people that resent us for trying to make them informed about people's humanity. And what does that have to do with corrections? Thank you.
Don't agree with the traumatization.
Oh, no, it happens. I'm saying it happens. I mean, it's probably a part of just the systems, parts of it that you can't not take physical hold and control of someone to maintain safety, but there's ways to do it. But there's ways you have to learn that. And this whole system, it's like what Obama said, turning the cruise ship around. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how they could do the job that they have been charged to do, and it not be unpleasant. I'm not sure what you mean by re-traumatize. What I'm talking about is the kids who, re-traumatization, you might not know if you're not in mental health, is many of our kids, actually I didn't have a slide, a lot of the women, girls, but many of the boys have had serious, chronic, pervasive, traumatic experiences from watching their mother, fathers beat each other, shoot each other in their home, to what they've seen in the community. I mean, every kid that comes in there, I have to say, like 9 out of 10 kids, somebody they know died within the last 12 months. And they might have been there and seen it, they might have heard about it, they might have all kinds of things. But we know, for human beings, you can be traumatized by just knowing what's going on around the corner, which is my whole point about disease. So a bullet might shoot you, so your family would be devastated. But if you're in a community where this is happening to everyone, I mean, the trauma, it can affect how you think about your own life and your hope. Depression, hopelessness is a part of depression. So I can treat you're depressed. I can give you some medication. It's actually one of the things we can actually treat. Medication and support of other kinds. Obviously, if there's something bad going on in your life, you take that away. But hopelessness, that is a function of the disease in a community. If you deform a human being's natural tendency to be hopeful, I mean, if you could take that and deform it, I mean, that you can't treat that with medication, and that's actually what's happening. And so when I had if you think back to the iceberg, so psychiatric disorders, I could treat that. So I'm really humbling myself to say all that other stuff going on, it's going to take all of us to fix that. Because that's the big rock that's making the ship sink.
How would you propose to solve the problem of there being a gross lack of mental health services being offered in the community where most of the kids come from that we think do not have a center? They come into your care, they receive great care while they're there for whatever length of stay, ranging from weeks to months.
2 years sometimes. 2 years sometimes, yes.
And then they get released.
Right.
No continuity.
I deal with this all the time. I have good. Right. What can I ask you? What sort of dimension? Okay. Oh, are you Yes. Hi, Nellis. Hey, hi. Well, that's something we deal with all the time, obviously. So there's 2 issues. Again, there's the structural and the psychological. So physically, Community Mental Health Center took care of many of the South Side and of Inglewood's mentally ill. Most of them adults and schizophrenics. They spent time there. There was a day program, and they're closed. And places are closing, and hospitals are going out of business. People are getting care in the ER and ending up in the hospital for 7 days and getting put on powerful medications without a breadth of assessment, finding out how they're doing in school without getting collateral information. But so to answer your question, part of it is engaging the family. You can't do anything for a teenager that doesn't care and thinks nothing's wrong with them if the parent's not on board. Part of the problem is you call the parent and you say, I'm Dr. So-and-so, I'm concerned, you've given me this history. I think there's something underlying that's going on that's been unaddressed. Oftentimes in the school, we got kids come in at 15 and they can't read, and nobody's ever done educational testing. They can't write a letter to their judge. Again, excuse me, I digress. So you say, I think there's a problem. They were like, yeah, you know what, the teacher said that, but I didn't have time. We had an appointment, I couldn't make it, it got canceled, there's a 6-month wait. So they say, do whatever for my kid. It's gonna help him. The judge will be happy, he's on his medication. Yeah, go ahead, do it. And we prescribe it with consent. The kid wants it, because most of the time, I wouldn't have been in trouble if I was on my bed, Judge Johnson. I wouldn't. And they'll take it, but in the crisis, you seize the crisis, but when you leave, it's not just that the kid never bought into it, the parents also never were allied with the idea that something's wrong with my kid anyway, many times. They just sort of go along, either out of ignorance, or out of, not that they're being complicit, but they just don't know. And it's hard to engage with anybody if you can't sit down and look them in the eye. Because it's always happening over the telephone. It's always happening under stress. So a lot of what we do, and when I say psychiatry does, you know, you're paying for us. We're not prescribing meds, but we're trying to engage families over time, over the first admission, the second admission, teach the parents that this is something real, this is something treatable. Doesn't mean you're crazy, it doesn't mean that you're a bad mom, but this is something that's, if you take action, not just medication, but follow up with somebody, and also maybe take some responsibility for something you need to do differently, then things can get better. So that's a big part of what we do. You know, you keep come through the revolving door, you keep talking to them and try to educate them, and you're empathetic. But, you know, if you have no alliance with a parent, you cannot never help the kid benefit from the services that you can provide, and that's the biggest thing. So you can build a clinic, like I said, you can build it, but they will not necessarily come. But also we need to build it too. I mean, oh, I have an answer, because I'm a pediatrician. One of the big things I thought I could do, primary care. I mean, child and adolescent psychiatrists in general, not just inner city, but if you live out in rural areas, if you live on Indian reservation, in communities that are sort of culturally isolated, so immigrant communities, I mean, they're all service deserts. But there are pediatricians, there's more primary care doctors, family practitioners. So part of what some of us are trying to do is engage with them, give them some tools, consult with them, be available so that they can treat sort of at the ground level, sort of foot soldiers, the front line, Marines. And, you know, they can, things that are simple and common, they can actually learn to feel comfortable prescribing these medicines. They can call us and ask and consult, and that's really what it's going to be. So for every one child psychiatrist, you know, if you might have 100 pediatricians they're already out there. Some of them are in like mills, you know, where they just, you know, school physical, shots, you know, get your Medicaid refund. And, you know, I mean, it's true. They provide the service, but they wouldn't be the ones that would want to do that because they have a commitment to providing holistic care. So, long answer. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And your general doctors as well. I mean, if you have a good one, he's going to ask you when you come and say, oh, my back, and I can't sleep, and can I have sleeping pills? He's going to ask you some questions that will, you know, try to uncover whether or not there's some underlying anxiety or depressive disorder. If you have a good doctor, they're going to do that. And pediatricians as well. They can prescribe, if they're trained, they can prescribe, treat the ADHD and talk to them. But see, it takes time. And nobody's going to pay them to spend an extra 15 minutes to ask the questions and to do the screening and maybe talk to the teacher. I mean, again, it's a catch-22. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm not hungry. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy. This is exactly where I needed to be today, May 17th, 2014. Thank you so much.